I had finally settled into my dream home, a stunning two-story house in what I thought was a quiet, welcoming neighborhood. It was the kind of place where people waved while tending their yards and kids zipped around on bikes without a second thought. The crown jewel of the property was my backyard, a pristine, shimmering blue pool that mirrored the sky so perfectly it could have been ripped from a magazine spread. I'd worked my tail off to afford this place, and I was ready to savor every moment. But there was one thing I hadn't bargained for: my neighbor. More specifically, Linda. The first time I laid eyes on her, she was standing in her yard, clipboard in hand, her lips pursed into a tight line, her eyes narrowed, as if she were cataloging every imperfection on my lot. I should have seen the red flags right then and there. On my very first morning, before I'd even unpacked half my boxes, a sharp knock rattled my door. There stood Linda, decked out in tense slacks and a floral blouse, her hair sculpted into a stiff, overdone bob that screamed self-appointed authority. No hello. No. Welcome to the neighborhood. She just jabbed a finger at my mailbox and declared, "That's a violation." Still bleary-eyed from moving day, I blinked at her. "Excuse me. The HOA rules state mailboxes must be exactly 42 inches off the ground. Yours is 44. She clicked her pen and scribbled something on her clipboard. "You'll need to fix that immediately." I glanced at my mailbox, then back at her. 2 inches? I almost laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Linda's stony expression told me she was dead serious. "I just moved in," I said with a sigh. "I'll handle it." "That would be wise," she replied with a thin, smug smile before pivoting and marching back to her house. I brushed it off as an overeager neighbor with too much free time. No big deal, right? Wrong. I had no idea what kind of terror Linda would unleash. Within my first week, an HOA fine arrived, $200 for unauthorized patio furniture. All I'd done was set out a couple of lawn chairs by the pool. Staring at the notice in disbelief, I decided to confront her, hoping it was a mix-up. I found Linda in her front yard, pruning her already flawless hedges. "Hey, I got a fine for my patio furniture. Is that really a rule?" Without looking up, she said, "All outdoor furniture must be approved by the HOA board. You didn't submit a request." "A request? For 2 chairs?" I asked, incredulous. She sighed, as if I were the dumbest person alive. "If we let one person bend the rules, everyone will. It's about upholding the neighborhood standards." I clenched my jaw, realizing she wasn't budging. "Fine," I muttered through gritted teeth and walked away. That's when it hit me. Linda wasn't just annoying. She was a dictator, and I was her new target. The fines kept rolling in. One for my trash cans being visible from the street, another for a non-compliant garden hose, and yet another for leaving my car in my driveway too long. It was nonstop. Every time I glanced out my window, there she was, clipboard in hand, watching. But nothing prepared me for what came next. It was a Saturday morning, and I was itching for a relaxing day by the pool. Coffee in hand, I stepped outside and stopped dead. My pool wasn't gone, exactly, but it was destroyed. Instead of crystal clear water, it was a solid gray mass of wet cement. My heart raced as I edged closer, praying it was a nightmare. It wasn't. The concrete was still setting, rough and uneven. I whipped around to Linda's yard. There she stood, sipping coffee, a smug grin plastered on her face. "What the hell happened to my pool?" I yelled. She took a leisurely sip. "Looks like someone didn't file a pool maintenance request." I stared, fists balling at my sides. "You did this." Linda shrugged. "The HOA has strict rules about unapproved modifications. You didn't submit the paperwork, so it had to be addressed." "Addressed? You filled my pool with cement." She gave me a fake pout. "Maybe next time you'll follow the rules." Then she sauntered back inside, like she hadn't just committed an act of pure malice. I stood there, trembling with fury, staring at the wreckage of my dream pool. I wanted to scream, to hurl something at her house. But I took a deep breath. No, I wouldn't let her win that easily. Linda thought I'd cave. She had no clue what she'd just unleashed. For days, I did nothing but plot. Every glance at my ruined backyard fueled my anger. She'd taken something I loved, something I'd earned, and smirked about it. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Revenge had to be smart, precise, and crushing. I dove into the HOA rulebook, scouring every line and loophole. Linda wielded those rules like a weapon against me, and likely everyone else, But if she could use them, so could I. I just needed the perfect angle. After hours of reading, I found it. The rules were airtight about man-made structures and aesthetics, but silent on natural disasters, environmental damage beyond a homeowner's control. That's when the idea struck. I wouldn't touch her property myself. I'd let nature do the dirty work. I called up a landscaping buddy, an expert in drainage, soil, and water flow. Over coffee, I laid out my plight. "You want to turn her yard into a swamp?" he asked, eyebrow raised. "Exactly," I said. He whistled. "That's evil. I'm in." We mapped it out for hours. The plan was subtle. No overnight flooding, nothing obvious. We'd tweak the water flow gradually until Linda's yard became a soggy disaster. The trick was the neighborhood's drainage system, underground pipes that shuttled rainwater to the sewer. If Linda's stopped working right, water would pool beneath her lawn. My friend hooked me up with a discreet crew. At night, they adjusted the pipes just enough to redirect runoff her way. It was legal, too. Nothing in the HOA rules held me accountable for natural water buildup on her land. The first sign came after a light rain. Peeking over the fence, I saw her grass looking darker, the soil mushy. Linda stood there, frowning, prodding the ground with her shoe. She had no idea what was coming. I played dumb, chatting about the weird weather whenever she was around. She didn't suspect a thing. Weeks later, after a big storm, it hit full force. Her yard was a swamp. Her fancy lawn furniture sank into the mud. Her prized hedges wilted, and a rancid, stagnant smell wafted everywhere. I watched from my window as she slogged through the muck, her face twisted in disgust, making frantic calls. The HOA couldn't help. There was no rule against nature. Her foundation started cracking from the water, and she shelled out thousands on fixes that failed every time it rained. Once, she stormed over, pounding my door. "This is your fault," she screeched. I feigned confusion. "What? Maybe it's just bad drainage. Check the HOA rules. Pretty sure they don't cover natural water issues." Her face went purple. She knew she had no leverage. The rules she'd weaponized were now useless against the rain. Her yard became a nightmare. New sod dissolved into mush, drainage systems backfired, and the stench grew unbearable. She called an emergency HOA meeting, ranting about sabotage, but the board shrugged. No rules were broken, no action required. Neighbors started whispering, then mocking her wild accusations. Linda, once feared, was losing her grip. I wasn't done. I made anonymous tips to environmental groups about a wetland forming in her yard, sending photos of the mess. Inspectors showed up, poking around. Linda freaked, but couldn't stop them. Days later, word came. Her land might be deemed a protected wetland, locking her into a costly, bureaucratic mess if she wanted to fix it. She was trapped. Then I upped the ante. I tipped off pest control about mosquitoes and snakes in her swamp. Soon, yellow warning signs dotted her property. She tore them down in a rage, but the neighbors noticed. Rumors spread. People avoided her house like the plague. I even called a wildlife rescue, claiming I'd seen an alligator. They didn't find one, but the spectacle fueled gossip and a local news blip about wildlife hazards. Linda unraveled, screaming at anyone who'd listen. After one last storm, her backyard caved into a sinkhole, a gaping, water-filled pit. Repair costs soared, and environmental red tape tightened. She had no choice. Within a week, she was gone, her house up for sale. No one touched it. Not with that swampy mess and rumors of alligators. The neighborhood bloomed without her. People relaxed, laughed, left out trash cans without fear. The HOA fizzled. No one wanted to play tyrant in her absence. I rebuilt my pool, bigger and better, and threw a massive party. The whole street showed up, celebrating her exit. Her house sat empty, then crumbled, condemned by the city. They turned the lot into a park, a final twist of the knife. Kids now play where her porch once stood. Linda thought she'd break me. She was wrong. I didn't just win, I freed us all from her reign. As I sat in that park, watching the neighborhood thrive, I smiled. She'd never come back.